Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Wednesday night. Lovely to have you guys here for another episode of the show. So we've got some roster news to go over. You're going to hear from Greg Cosell of NFL Films in just a little bit. Actually, Robert, if you could email me that clip, it for some reason came through to my phone very condensed, so I will not be able to upload that in the way that we've sent it. But you will hear from Greg a little later on, and we'll talk about the opportunity cost, the opportunity that will now be available for some young wide receivers, and the cost, of course, with Kyle Phillips and a frustrating continued injury saga for this dude now heading into year number 2. We'll do rising and falling at the end of the show, because we always do at the end of the Wednesday night program. Got a lot of stuff to get to. Looking forward to getting it in with you guys together throughout the course of the next hour or so. Before we get started, need you to share the program, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. If you're hanging out, we can go wherever you guys want to go, wherever you want to share us around. We'd be happy to. We'd be grateful if you would do that for us. If you're on Twitter, please retweet the show, bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Facebook Live, you can share now to public. That's in the bottom left. YouTube or Twitch, subscribe to the channel, like the video, tell a friend to do the same. Make sure you stay liking the video as more of you guys continue to trickle in on YouTube. We would be grateful for you that way. This is something that happened yesterday. XD Gamer 22 says, happy late birthday. My birthday was over a month ago. So, I'm fine to continue celebrating my birthday a month after the fact, but you don't have to. It's okay. I swear. With that being said, let's go ahead and get this show started. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Wednesday evening. I'm your host, Buck Rising, and I am proud, as always, to be presented to you by the law offices of Amanda J. Gentry. Go to amandajgentry.com. Find out how they can protect your constitutional rights wherever justice demands. Words that they mean at the core of their mission as a business. To protect your constitutional rights, go to amandajgentry.com. And True Math Fitness in the Gulch. Your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident can be found at True Math Fitness. They helped me lose 58 pounds. They'll help you get the best version of you. A new way to work out for the new you at True Math Fitness in the Gulch. So with Kyle Phillips' injury on IR, with Kyle Phillips' injury sending him to IR, then putting him on injured reserve today, he's going to miss 4 games minimum of the season with this MCL issue. And so now you look at the situation for the wide receivers and you say, all right, well, Kyle Phillips, that's a really, really frustrating situation. And I want to start there with the frustrations around Phillips' situation before we talk about the opportunity for the wide receivers. Because, well, I'll explain why I want to get into this here in just a second. First, let's ask your Two Rivers Ford take. On Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch in the comment section, if you would be so kind, just simply, what was your reaction to the news that Kyle Phillips was going to injured reserve? We will discuss together in the comment section. You can interact wherever it is that you're streaming with us tonight. Your Two Rivers Ford take. What was your reaction to Kyle Phillips going to injured reserve? Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch is where you can react. We will do so together right after I remind you that the Two Rivers Ford take is made possible by the wonderful people at Two Rivers Ford. 40 years here in Middle Tennessee working with honesty and integrity. Two Rivers Ford is the best car buying experience around. Powered by Ford, driven by people. That's their motto. Go to tworiversford.com to build your next Ford at Two Rivers Ford. So what was your reaction to Kyle Phillips going to injured reserve today? Clayton Smith says expected. Amar says not surprised. Kyle Phillips, a.k.a. Mr. Glass. Ken Caniff says we got people more concerned about Burks than Phillips. That's from Ken Caniff on Facebook. Well, I don't necessarily think there's cause for concern with Treylon Burks' situation. Obviously it looked bad in Minnesota. Understandably, Titans fans get chest tightness anytime there's an injury at any position. You guys are, I don't want to say easily triggered. That feels like an unfair characterization, but it is triggering for you for, reasons that are easily explained. whenever you see a player go down, because you've had an awful rate of injury, not just 1 year, but the last 2 years. And they've really, like injury to the point of ridiculousness. 1, a record-setting injury year, and 2, following it up almost as badly. Had they not broken the record in the first year, they might have done so in 2022. So anytime you see these players go down, it's an understandable reaction, and any fan base is going to react poorly to seeing their players get hurt, especially players who you think can make a difference. But I think the disconnect because Rooney Glover says pissed off, and I feel like that speaks for a lot of you. I don't want to speak for all of you, but I feel like Rooney speaks for a lot of you. Pissed off is a pretty common reaction that I've gotten to this, because I've seen Kyle Phillips do the things in practice that make me know that he is going to be, or can be, should he stay healthy enough, that he can roll out of bed and play the slot. You'll hear from Greg Cosell on that in just a little bit. Greg Cosell feels the same way that the Titans coaching staff feels like. This is a player who can contribute to your football team, was prepared to contribute to your football team right away. And then you lost him for the season not for the season, but you lost him for the vast majority of the season due to the shoulder injury, and then following that up with hamstring issues. I've seen what he's capable of in practice. I've seen the connection that he has with the quarterback. It's real to me, but it's less real to you guys because you haven't got that evidence. Many of you don't get to go to practice on a regular basis, or certainly training camp is a limited opportunity for some of you to get out there and see your favorite team practice, whereas I get the opportunity to be out there every day during training camp, and then once a week. There's 3 days that are open to media. Once a week is about all I can get out there now with the radio show schedule. But so I see this. I have proof of concept. I know that Kyle Phillips is a starting slot wide receiver. I know that Kyle Phillips is one of the best 3 players at that position on the roster, including Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins. Problem is, he can't stay healthy enough for you guys to see that too. Now, your evidence is week 1 against the Giants, and you would say, well, that's too small of a sample size to say anything definitive. And I would say, well, I understand it's not live game reps. I understand it doesn't mean as much that he does it in practice, but I see him do all the things in practice that he was doing in that Giants game, and I know that if he can stay healthy, he can continue to produce at that level. The problem is he can't stay healthy. Craig Baxter says of Kyle Phillips, here we go again. And, I'm sure he's just as frustrated by the situation. In fact, so it wasn't an extended conversation, but a couple of my colleagues caught up with Kyle Phillips in the locker room on Monday, and he was sporting a pretty substantial brace on his knee.
Absolutely. Definitely scared me, but kind of best case scenario of what I could have done. So at the end of the day, just pretty thankful I'll still be able to come back this season. It's going good. Got me in this brace, feeling real good. Able to walk around, don't really have a limp or anything. So it's going well. No goal. Don't really have any timeline. Just, as you know, everyone always says, just taking day by day. Trying to get better each day. Yeah. Sure.
So that is Kyle Phillips talking about his injury situation. Now, it's an MCL injury. It's going to cost him at least the first 4 games of the season. Beyond that, I don't want to speculate. But he has a pretty substantial brace on his knee, like not like a sleeve, right? Like the kind that offensive linemen wear, which is a concern. Now, he said in the locker room that that's not something that he expects to hinder him. I don't know how somebody his size, who relies on his mobility, his change of direction, his speed, and his footwork, wouldn't be disrupted by the presence of that knee brace. Now, none of this matters if you're not available. And to this point, he is consistently unavailable. That's not his fault, but it is the situation at hand. Amar says, we see the videos, Buck. We see it too, but he's more like fool's gold right now. Maybe in the future he pans out. So far, not good. I completely understand. Boban says, Phillips reminds me of Adam Humphries. Great in the field, but cannot stay on the field. So great is a relative term, but like good. He's a good slot player, but he can't stay healthy, right? Humphries had concussions. Apparently Adam Humphries is still out there. Apparently Adam Humphries was on the Houston Texans roster wearing 27. Somebody tweeted me that the other day. I wasn't able to verify it, and I don't think he made the active roster, but apparently Humphries is still out there. Kyle gets hurt on special teams, says Steve Kaiser. Let's keep him from special teams. Well, this is they're football players, right? Like you can't bubble wrap them. Blaine Bishop was on the radio show today, and he said if you're gonna approach this with fear, then this is the wrong league for you. I think that ultimately, he's got to get reps, and he wasn't available last year enough to get those reps in game. So preseason, I think it was completely fine to play him in preseason and for him to try and return some stuff in preseason. Now, unfortunately for him, he got hurt. I think that, can you find different ways he's got to play special teams. Your third wide receiver has to play special teams. I just don't think that there's any way to avoid what is now going to be a part of the conversation. Kind of like Tua, right? Tua talked about the idea of contemplating retirement. Tua is physically much bigger for a player who I know to not need that much muscle mass on him, but he's trying to do things to stay durable. Now, Phillips did his offseason work. He put in the work to get bigger. He looks physically bigger. He is physically stronger. But, an MCL injury in a preseason game occurs, and now he's injury prone, even though the 3 injuries that he's had are not connected right now. It's a tough spot to be in. I think he makes a difference when he's available. The problem is he's been available hardly at all. Puka Hare says of a Nancy Thigpen comparison to Kyle Phillips, she says Thigpen at least played in some regular season games. Yeah, Phillips, it's really not, it's not an ideal situation because he can make this offense, I think, legitimately good. He can contribute to this offense in a way that makes them legitimately good. Not that Kyle Phillips makes the offense good, but Kyle Phillips has an important part to play in the construction of the offense. And for that to be perpetually let down by the fact that his body keeps betraying him, you hate to chalk it up to anything more than bad luck, but it is pretty bad luck for Kyle Phillips right now. A to Z Sports Primetime is presented by TrueMath Fitness in the Gulch. Go to TrueMathFitness.com. Get your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident. A new way to work out for the best version of you. I rave any chance I get to talk about TrueMath, whether it's the coaches, the group classes, the personal training, or just their facility conveniently located downtown in the Gulch. TrueMathFitness.com is where you go for the best workout in Middle Tennessee. And as I said, your first workout is free. So looking at the Kyle Phillips circumstance, they kept 7 wide receivers. That's probably not what it's going to look like heading into New Orleans for the week 1 active roster. And of course, they'll pare that even further down. To 46 for game day, of course. So with that being said, how many wide receivers are going to have an opportunity in the time that Kyle Phillips is going to miss? Because they clearly understand that it was going to be a period of time that Kyle Phillips was going to be unavailable. And so they've kept some options open at wide receiver. So who is most available to help fill the role that Kyle Phillips stood to occupy? We're going to talk about this together on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. In the comment section, if you would, let me know who stands to gain the most from an opportunity standpoint with Kyle Phillips unavailable. Who stands to gain the most with Kyle Phillips' injury? We'll talk about this together on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch right after I remind you that the Primetime Show is presented by the great people at the law offices of Amanda J. Gentry. Wherever justice demands, Amanda J. and her team have you covered. 35 different counties they have practiced in Tennessee family and criminal courts. The law offices of Amanda J. Gentry are there for you wherever justice demands. They mean it to protect your constitutional rights, particularly if you are a father, your constitutional right to be a father to your child. It is critical that you have the proper protections in place. Make sure you go with the best. Make sure you go with the law offices of Amanda J. Gentry, AmandaJGentry.com. So, who stands to gain the most from the opportunity that is out there with Kyle Phillips not in the lineup at the moment. There's a couple of different options that you can look at. Now, one, you might say Colton Dow. Colton Dow, who you heard from yesterday, talking about how much it meant to him to make this team, how important it was for Colton Dow to find ways to get on this roster, how cool it was for him to play at the stadium for his favorite team because he grew up a Titans fan in Lebanon. So for Colton Dow, I think he's probably the odd man out when they start to get creative with the roster math as we continue to move on from this. But of course, by nature of being on the active roster to start, he at least gets an opportunity. Josh Sabata says, is Dow a slot though? Well, here's the thing. You don't necessarily, there are guys who come up through college and just play the slot. There are guys who come up through in college and just play outside receiver, right? But in the NFL, matchups dictate that you find ways to get your matchups, your advantageous matchups in the slot or outside or with your tight end or with your running back out of the backfield or with your running back split out wide, right? Empty sets, all different ways that you can create matchup opportunities. So is Dow a slot? I mean, he wasn't a slot receiver in college. Kyle Phillips exclusively was a slot receiver in college. But it doesn't mean that just because you're one thing, you can't do the other. Now, for example, I don't think that this is going to be their solution, although it may be a part of it, and we'll see how they deploy them week 1 in New Orleans. But DeAndre Hopkins, you don't think of DeAndre Hopkins as a slot receiver, correct? I would venture a guess to say most of you do not. But in the 1 year that DeAndre Hopkins was on the Texans roster with Tim Kelly as the offensive coordinator, DeAndre Hopkins worked primarily out of the slot more than at any other point in his career. He was the most productive, or one of the most productive, not the most productive, but one of the most productive slot receivers that year in the NFL. So you can dictate matchups by, I don't want to say you can line up anybody in the slot, but you can find, a guy doesn't have to be a tiny wide receiver to play in the slot, is basically the summary. Because Kyle Phillips and Adam Humphries, obviously, those types of players have existed in the league, most famously with the Patriots. You look at the Titans and what they've tried to do. They've tried to find a player to fit that mold. But I think that when you talk about the guy who stands to gain the most out of this, you're probably talking about, so let's say for all intents and purposes that the starting Titans 3 wide receiver look, Hopkins, Burks, Phillips in the slot, right? Excuse me. So Hopkins and Burks in this scenario, they can stay outside primarily if that is how they choose to deploy them, if that's how they end up choosing to deploy and taking advantage of matchups and finding ways to get those two involved. So let's say that those two are going to stay the outside wide receivers, the X and the Z. So then who on your roster is left? Now, I think a lot of you guys are going to say Kearis Jackson. And I think that Kearis Jackson is a natural answer for a lot of you to go to. He's a returner, right? He's a smaller build for a wide receiver, comparative to what else they have on the roster. He's not tall and long the way that Dow and NWI and Burks and Hopkins are. He's built more like Phillips and Kinsey. So I think a lot of people might have said, well, Jackson is your solution in the slot, and he may have a role to play there. I don't know what Kearis Jackson's role is going to be. But if I'm going off precedent and a player who knows their offense, knows all 3 positions in their offense, X, Z, and slot, then it's probably Nick Westbrook-Akina who's going to be the beneficiary of those reps. Now, Chris Moore has given them more, or looks like he can give them more offensively than he had, previously in other spots, right? The opportunity wasn't there for him in Baltimore. It wasn't really there for him in Houston until he had that year with Tim Kelly where they were able to produce together. Last year, he had a career year, but was in a situation where somebody had to catch the targets from Davis Mills, and they were running out of wide receivers left and right. So the person who I think you're going to see the snaps increase for, excuse me, I think you're going to see much more NWI. I think that Chris Moore is the backup for the two outside wide receivers, and that NWI they are more comfortable with in the slot. I think that NWI is your guy. Now, it doesn't have to be that way for the whole season. You can bitch about that. You can moan about that. You can say, what's NWI still doing on the roster? And whatever. NWI is just going to go out there, try and do the job the best that he can do it. And whether you're satisfied with that or not, we'll see what the results bear out. But for right now, NWI is the answer, part of the answer to that question. Now, it may be that they work Hopkins in the slot some, that they find other ways to get Treylon Burks the ball in space, right? They don't have to just have him run go routes or run the seam every time and try and beat the receiver down or beat the defensive back down the field. They can find different ways to get the ball out, right? And they can find different options in the slot. I'm not saying that it's going to be NWI primarily on the field all the time. What I'm saying is the bulk of the solution is probably going to be NWI. Now, can Chris Moore find some snaps there? Sure. But I think that NWI is the more trusted commodity, and that NWI, at least for the immediate, is probably going to be who they go to. So I would keep that in the back of your mind. I know that that's, I don't know that he's going to be your starting slot receiver, for lack of a better term, but I would anticipate him getting a lot more snaps than he might otherwise have had Kyle Phillips been healthy. So that's where we are at with the wide receiver situation. And of course, we will continue to keep an eye on that. Let's wrap things up with a little stock up, stock down, or as we like to call it around here, rising or falling. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Whose stock rose, whose stock fell this week in sports? We will discuss it together right after I remind you that the Primetime Show is made possible by the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. Go to GaryAshton.com. Get your dream address without the stress. The intel edge you need to succeed is found at GaryAshton.com. So whose stock rose, whose stock fell this week in sports? Let's see. Somebody brought up Mason Kinsey. Stock up for Mason Kinsey without Kyle Phillips or with Kyle Phillips on IR. Mason Kinsey could be a game day elevation, right? He is also somebody that they look to play some slot snaps. He might be called up from the practice squad and they burn one of his opportunities on the Saints game or in that first 4-game stretch that we know that Phillips is definitively going to have to miss. I'm curious to see how they address it. I don't know that Kinsey is going to be the first option. In fact, I think that NWI is definitely the place that I would look at. Major Key says McMath stock rose. Why? What did Racy McMath got cut and ended up on the Colts practice squad? I don't know why. I mean, maybe Racy's going to get opportunity there, but I don't think there's anything particularly appealing about the Racy McMath experience. I don't know where his stock up would have come from. Amar says Skip Bayless with the new undisputed stock up. I don't know. Isn't Skip getting less airtime than he's ever had? I don't know that Skip probably likes that. So maybe the show is better, but I don't know if Skip enjoys it. Let's see. Burks rising, Dillard falling. Why is Dillard falling? What's wrong with Dillard? Dillard's been fine. I don't think Dillard's any kind of a problem. I can't speak for stock up, but I will say that stock down is definitely Jalen Hyatt, because Jalen Hyatt wants to wear number 13 in New York with the Giants. And of course, you can do that after Odell Beckham Jr. did. But you have to understand, you're bringing all kinds of attention on you that is not about you.
Did that Odell part of it even click in your head when you first thought about it, or did
it
people
definitely,
say
yeah,
it?
It definitely did. It definitely did. I mean, what he did here, had a great career here when he was with the Giants. Kind of took over, and I was a fan. When I was young, watching him from high school to college, and now being here.
So that's Jalen Hyatt. He looks pretty uncomfortable dealing with the New York media. And, you go from not being exposed to media in college to having to deal with the New York market. I'm sure it's pretty jarring. But, stock down on that. It's not like no player for the Giants can ever wear 13 again because Odell Beckham Jr. did. But you're going to invite all kinds of comparisons. You're going to have a lot more scrutiny on you. It's going to be fun for a while until you screw up, and then they're going to bury you. I don't know he was wearing 84. He looked kind of funky in 84, so maybe 13's a better look. 13 is definitely a better look. But I just think that, I don't know. I didn't love the decision there. I didn't love the explanation, and I don't think he's gonna. I think that number has the potential to be a bigger burden than it does anything else. Corey D. Jackson says Jalen Hyatt still can't get off press coverage. Who cares? Go Dogs. I don't know if you watched the Jets Giants preseason finale, but yeah, Sauce Gardner pressing Jalen Hyatt is not something that he was prepared for, nor did he enjoy. So I would say that is something that is worth monitoring moving forward into the NFL season. It's going to do it for us tonight. Check out the install with Greg Cosell. New episode available now. If you missed the 615 sessions earlier, we did it with Teron Davenport of ESPN. That was a great one. What else do we have going on? Radio show tomorrow from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. Who do we have on the radio show tomorrow? You'll hear from Rand Carthon. Rand Carthon will be on the radio show tomorrow. We'll carry his press conference live, and we'll talk a little Vols because they play here in Nashville to open their season this Saturday with Adam Sparks of the Knoxville News Sentinel. So we'll look forward to talking with you guys tomorrow from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone, and then one more primetime show tomorrow night. See you guys.
Are you surprised to hear that?
Certainly not. The first year we took it to the limit. And I was in Miami with my new beach house. Well, it was a couple minutes from the beach.
It's been 20 years since then. We haven't been too strong in the last few years.
Oh, we've been strong. We're just playing by the rules. You can't have a newcomer come in and steal a show.